Hey everybody, Rob from Karma Comic Chameleon. Today we're looking at a couple of pro-revenge stories. First one, my manager was an awful person to me, but I got her fired in an embarrassing fashion. Let's jump right in. Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school, I got a new job to support myself during college. The new gig was in a pet store, and I was working in the department that sold the fish, aquariums, reptiles, and birds, etc., etc. The store manager was an awesome guy who I will call Kurt. Kurt was an old school guy. He went to work, worked hard, and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager over my department was this large snaggletooth witch of a woman. I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than her. She preferred the fish, whereas I had kept snakes for the past 4 to 5 years. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on, she was terrible to me. She singled me out to clean the goldfish tanks and had the other employees cover sales every day I worked. She would say rude things to me such as, "You are the weak link in my team. You are the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year, my hours had been cut by about 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was, and he told me that our department had lost too much money between lacks of sales and broken merchandise, etc. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously, myself and a few coworkers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie is. Turns out, Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside of the store. We found out she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, mice, and selling them to customers she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, our store had a couple corporate policies. We did not feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters, and we condemned breeding dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers, all the while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening I thought I had figured it out. Stephanie was an otherwise lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in, she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around, helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every single item she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to a register and went to check them out. She's lazy and would never do this for any other customers. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to the other cashiers about Stephanie's checking customers out, and they said that she only ever rang up certain customers and she acted weird when they did it. They suspected she was abusing coupons for them or applying hefty discounts. I got my coworkers to corroborate my story about the under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior, and I went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 UPCs and the time written on it, and I said, "I think if you look up a transaction from Register 2 at this time last night, you will find a large discount applied to it. These are the items I would expect you to find on that transaction." He was a bit puzzled, and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure, but after seeing her in action, I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple weeks later, I was at work, and I noticed Kurt was standing near the door watching closely. It just so happens Stephanie was coming in for her shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door, he called her over to his office. Apparently waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but it only had about half of the items I listed, but every item that was on the receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch her for a few weeks, and in that time frame, they found her to be taking her customers around shopping, personally taking them up to the register, and scanning every other item and putting the expensive stuff into the cart without ringing it up. In that time span, she had given away over $1,500 in merchandise, and he looked back at the logs we keep for broken merchandise that is written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. It was something like 1,000% more written off broken merchandise than was found at the same time last quarter. All in all, she was charged with stealing and defrauding the store in over $3,500 in merchandise, and it just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle for her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a quick wink. If there's one thing we've learned from reading the ProRevenge subreddit, it's that you need to document things and just keep note of what's going on around you when you feel like something isn't right. On to our next story. Uncle bankrupts his previous employer. Let's jump right in. Not sure if this is petty or pro or whatever, you be the judge. My uncle is an Indian doctor. In the 90s, there was a massive doctor shortage in Australia, so the government gave him citizenship. Unfortunately, you still had to sit 3 expensive exams to work as a doctor in Australia. These exams cost thousands of dollars, only happened twice a year, had limited sitting spots and times, and had arbitrary pass and fail marks. So many Indian doctors ended up becoming taxi drivers or small businessmen, etc. My uncle decided instead he would reapply and go through Australian medical school. Sure enough, being a doctor for 10 plus years makes medical school easy, and my uncle was top of his class. He decided, since he was already pushing 40, had a family, he would apply to become a GP, family physician, instead of applying to be a surgeon like most of his teachers had suggested. At the time, many desperate foreign doctors were applying for GP residency. They would essentially get treated like crap. They would be forced to work unpaid overtime. They would not be given proper study time or leave to sit mandatory exams. They would pocket the meals and accommodation, study, leave allowances that you were supposed to be paid by the training college. They would roster you to work every Saturday or Sunday shift, and if you refused, they would give you a bad review and your training would be jeopardized. This mostly happened to foreign doctors, as most of them would be in bad debt and highly desperate for any sort of work. When my uncle graduated, he applied for GP training in a practice that is located within an Indian ethnic enclave so that he would have access to religious foods and schools, etc. for the kids. Sure enough, this practice engaged in all of the above f***ery. My uncle would work every single Saturday shift. During his dedicated study time, he would have to come in to work. He got reprimanded for not overcharging patients in line with their framework. Worst of all, when my aunt was really sick and hospitalized, they wouldn't give him any time off to look after her and the kids. The owner of the clinic was a white GP who was openly racist against Indians, Asians, and Aboriginal people, who were a large percentage of the clientele of this clinic. My uncle bided his 3 years, and as soon as his documentation came through making him a GP, he quit that instant. He went down to the local bank and got a loan to open up his own practice. All his old patients quickly moved with him to the new practice. The first year he struggled, but his practice quickly became known and word spread. Surprise, surprise, foreign trained doctors actually work well and care about their patients if you actually care about them and give them appropriate wages and living conditions. More patients and more doctors looked to work with my uncle. Within 2 years, my uncle had a GP practice that had 4 doctors, 2 nurses, 2 trainees, and a manager. His practice easily rivaled his original teacher's. He then started 2 more GP practices with the money he was pulling in. These practices trapped his old teacher's clinic in a 2-kilometer triangle. He would advertise heavily and make sure he could take as much business from his old teacher as he could. Within 5 years, his old teacher's practice went from hiring 6 doctors, 4 nurses, and 6 trainees to just 1 doctor, his old teacher, and no one else. His old teacher tried to sell up his practice to other doctors, but no one would purchase it given how successful my uncle's 3 surrounding practices were. He then tried to sell it to my uncle, who refused to buy even at a ridiculously low sale price. Instead, he waited for the bank to repossess his old teacher's clinic and then purchased it for a bit more money from the bank. My uncle then repurposed the building into his main offices from where he runs his other 3 practices. He made sure to redevelop his old boss's room into staff toilets just as one final tribute to the human turd that was his old boss. People take advantage of other people. This is absolutely human nature. It's up to us to better ourselves and come out on top in the end. Congratulations to OP's uncle for coming out on top and living the dream. I hope that every time he uses one of those new toilets, he has one picked out that is right where the previous boss's desk was. I want to thank both of the OPs for posting their stories to the ProRevenge subreddit. You can visit them at the links in the description below. Please go there and give them an upvote. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comic Chameleon saying thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.